When did you last replay a 5-minute conversation for 3 hours afterward? Not a fight, not a tragedy, a conversation. Something you said or didn't say, looping on repeat while the rest of your evening quietly disappeared. The relationship where you've drafted the same text message 11 times and sent none of them. The career where you've had the resignation letter open in a tab for 2 months, cursor blinking, nothing typed. The conversation where you rehearse what you should have said in the shower, in traffic, at 2 in the morning, long after the person you're arguing with has forgotten the exchange happened at all. There is a gap most people live inside without ever naming it. It isn't sadness. It isn't quite anxiety either, though it borrows anxiety's body, the tight chest, the restless leg, the low static hum behind your thoughts. It's the space between knowing what you want to do and actually doing it. A waiting room with no chairs and no door. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent a career studying exactly this kind of gap, not the moment of decision, but the machinery that runs before it. In 2011, in Thinking, Fast and Slow, he gave the world a working map of 2 systems inside your head. One fast, automatic and confident, one slow, effortful and reluctant to engage unless it has to. Overthinking lives in the seam between them. Call it what it is, rumination. Not a flaw in your character. A specific, mechanical state with a specific cause. Rumination is worse than the things people mistake it for. It isn't failure ends. It isn't grief moves, however slowly. Rumination doesn't move. It's a loop with no exit condition, and the tragedy of a loop is that it feels like progress. Every replay feels like you're getting closer to an answer. You are not. You're wearing a groove into the same 6 inches of ground. This video is going to show you the mechanism behind that loop, not motivational language, not a pep talk, but the actual cognitive architecture Kahneman spent 40 years mapping, and why it traps some decisions and not others. We'll walk through why the loop feels like wisdom, what it's actually costing you while it runs, why some kinds of hard decisions can't be resolved by more thinking at all, and what finally breaks the pattern. Here's the part that will be uncomfortable. The answer isn't a better thought. You already have the thought. You've had it for months. The thing standing between you and relief was never information. It was never information at all. You think of yourself as a careful person, thoughtful, someone who considers all sides before acting, who doesn't rush into things the way other people do. Kahneman's research suggests something less flattering. You're not being careful. You're being run by a system that was never built for this kind of decision in the first place. In Thinking, Fast and Slow, Kahneman describes 2 systems operating inside every mind. System 1 is fast, automatic, intuitive. It recognizes faces, finishes familiar phrases, reacts before you've consciously registered a threat. System 2 is slow, deliberate, effortful. It's what you use to multiply 2-3-digit numbers, or to genuinely weigh a decision with no obvious right answer. System 2 is expensive to run. Your brain avoids using it whenever System 1 can produce a plausible enough answer instead. Here's the mechanical problem. Big, ambiguous, emotionally loaded decisions, the relationship, the career change, the hard conversation, are exactly the category System 2 is built for. But System 1 doesn't stay quiet just because a decision is hard. It keeps firing anyway, generating quick emotional verdicts, dread, unease, a flinch, and System 2, instead of doing its actual job of evaluating the decision, gets hijacked into justifying System 1's flinch instead. Think of it like a smoke detector wired directly to the sprinklers, except the sprinklers never actually turn off. The alarm keeps ringing, nothing gets put out. That's rumination, not deep thought, but a fast system's alarm state, being endlessly relitigated by a slow system that was never asked the right question. You'll recognize the symptoms in your own body before you recognize them in your thinking. A decision that resurfaces at the exact same time every night. A tightness that shows up specifically when the topic comes near, and nowhere else. A rehearsed script you run in your head that never changes, word for word. Like a scene you've watched so many times you could recite it. A strange comfort in staying inside the loop, because inside the loop, nothing can go wrong yet. Kahneman's broader point about System 1 is that it is built for speed and coherence, not accuracy. It prefers a story that feels complete over one that's actually correct. Rumination is System 1 building you a story that feels complete. I'm still thinking this through. It isn't. It's the same 6 frames playing on a loop, dressed up as diligence. There's a second, hidden cost that compounds. Every day a decision sits unresolved, your brain treats the ambiguity itself as evidence the decision is dangerous, a phenomenon adjacent to what Kahneman called the effect heuristic, where the discomfort of a topic gets mistaken for information about the topic. The longer you avoid it, the more dangerous it starts to feel, regardless of whether anything about the actual situation has changed. This is why decisions you've delayed for 6 months feel harder now than they did on day 1, not because they got harder. Because you got more afraid of your own fear. Try this. Think of a decision you've postponed for at least a month. Ask yourself honestly, in the last week, has any new information entered the picture, anything real? Anything you didn't already know, or have you simply been feeling the same feeling on repeat? If nothing has changed, you're not thinking, you're spinning. Notice what the loop actually optimizes for. It isn't optimizing for a good decision. It's optimizing for the reduction of a bad feeling, in this exact moment, by any means available, and replaying the same scene one more time is cheap and immediate, while actually resolving the situation is effortful and uncertain. Given that choice, System 1 will take the cheap option almost every time, and it will disguise that choice as diligence. Because I'm still working on it is a story your slow system is happy to sign off on without checking the receipts. There's a healthy version of this, and a destructive one, and the line between them is sharper than it feels from inside. Healthy deliberation produces new questions. Destructive rumination produces the same question, again, in a different outfit. Here's your one-line test. If you can't remember a single new consideration you've had in the last 3 sittings with this problem, you're not deliberating. You're rehearsing. The next part examines something stranger, why this loop doesn't feel like a malfunction while it's happening. It feels like the opposite. It feels like wisdom. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Rumination doesn't feel like a malfunction. It feels like responsibility. It feels like the mature thing to do, to keep weighing, to keep considering, to refuse to be reckless. That feeling is the trap's best disguise. Kahneman's work on prospect theory, developed with Amos Tversky, showed something that should unsettle anyone who thinks of themselves as still deciding. Losses register roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains. Given that asymmetry, not deciding feels safe, but it isn't neutral. It's a bet. Specifically, it's a bet that the cost of staying exactly where you are is smaller than the cost of acting and being wrong. Most people never examine that bet. They just keep making it, night after night, without noticing they're gambling at all. Here is the structure that keeps the belief alive. It never gets tested. As long as you don't act, you never find out whether the catastrophe you're imagining was real or manufactured. The belief that I'm not ready yet can't be disproven, because you never reach the point where readiness would be checked against reality. It's a closed loop, and closed loops don't get corrected, they just get repeated, each repetition adding weight it hasn't actually earned. Try this diagnostic. Go back to the last time you held a belief like this one: I need more time. I'm not sure enough yet. Something might go wrong in a comparable situation. What actually happened when you finally moved? For most people, the honest answer is less than they feared and faster than they expected. That data point existed already. It just never got weighed, because the loop doesn't consult evidence. It consults dread. The first real exit from rumination isn't a better decision. It's seeing the belief itself for what it is, not a conclusion you reasoned your way to, but a default your fast system handed you and your slow system never actually audited. Seeing that doesn't resolve anything yet. It just removes the disguise. What's underneath is a cost you've been paying quietly, every day, without adding it up. Put this on a ledger, because that's what it actually is. On one side, the cost of acting. It's real. It's often uncomfortable. But it's finite. It happens once. It has a beginning and an end, and once it's paid, it's paid. On the other side, the cost of not acting. It doesn't announce itself as a cost at all. It shows up as a low background tax, charged every single day the decision stays open, and unlike the first cost, it never closes out. Give that invisible cost some texture. It's the 20 minutes before sleep, most nights, spent circling the same unresolved thing. It's the fraction of attention missing from a conversation with someone else, because part of you is still in the other room, rehearsing. It's the version of you that shows up slightly distracted, slightly tired, slightly elsewhere, not because of what happened, but because of what hasn't happened yet. Kahneman's research on cognitive load is relevant here. Though he wasn't writing about rumination specifically, System 2 has a limited daily budget. Every unresolved decision you're carrying draws on that same limited reserve, quietly reducing what's available for everything else: work, relationships, even ordinary willpower. An open loop isn't free just because it's invisible. It's drawing down a battery you need for the rest of your day. Invert the framing you've been using. You've been treating the decision as the expensive thing and the delay as the cheap thing. It's the reverse. The delay is the expensive one. You're just being billed in a currency that doesn't show up on a balance sheet, so it never feels like spending. Run this backward through your own history. How long have you actually known what you needed to do? Most people, asked honestly, land on an answer that embarrasses them: a little weeks, sometimes years, of paying the daily tax on a decision they'd effectively already made. There's a consistent pattern among people who finally act on something they'd delayed for a long time. The cost was real, but almost always smaller than they'd budgeted for, because the anticipation itself had been doing most of the damage. The dread was the expensive part. The decision was comparatively cheap. Here's the reframe to sit with. Clarity is not what precedes action. It's what action produces. You don't think your way to certainty and then move. You move, and certainty assembles itself afterward, built from information that only exists on the other side of the decision. Notice, too, what the daily tax actually buys you. Nothing. It doesn't make the eventual decision safer. It doesn't make you more prepared. It doesn't reduce the odds of things going wrong once you finally act. It's not an investment in a better outcome. It's a subscription you never meant to sign up for, renewing itself automatically every night for a service you're not using. Kahneman's work draws a useful distinction. Adapted here, there's difficulty that yields to information and difficulty that doesn't. A hard math problem is the first kind. Given enough time and the right method, it resolves. An unmade decision about your life is usually the second kind. No amount of additional thinking produces the missing variable, because the missing variable doesn't exist yet. It only gets created by acting. For this second kind of difficulty, more time doesn't sharpen the picture. It amplifies it. Every day you don't act, your mind generates a slightly more vivid, slightly more catastrophic version of what could go wrong, a rehearsal loop with nothing to check itself against. So it drifts further from anything real. Unchecked, you imagine the conversation, and by the third rehearsal, it's gone worse than any conversation you've ever actually had. You imagine leaving the job, and each retelling adds one more disaster that has never once happened to anyone you actually know. You imagine the relationship ending, and the imagined version is lonelier and more permanent than any breakup that has ever actually occurred in your life. Here's the finding, stated plainly. More time doesn't produce more readiness. It produces a more elaborate fear. The two get mistaken for each other because they both feel like thinking about it. But only one of them is doing anything useful. The exit here isn't psychological, it's mechanical. Act at the first real opportunity, not the point where you finally feel ready. Because for this category of decision, that point doesn't arrive on its own. Readiness isn't a precondition you wait for. It's retrospective. It's the story you tell about yourself after you've already moved, not a feeling you locate beforehand and use as permission. This is easy to say and hard to trust, because everything about the loop is built to feel like the responsible choice, right up until the moment you step outside it and realize how much of the fear was self-generated. The version of the conversation that lives in your head has never once had to survive contact with an actual other person, capable of responding with warmth or boredom or relief outcomes your rehearsal loop rarely bothers to imagine, because they don't feed the loop. What does actually change once you move? There's a common way people picture the decision they've been avoiding, as a door. On the other side is some better, cleaner version of their life, and the decision is just the key. That metaphor is wrong, and it's part of what keeps people stuck, waiting for a door to feel worth opening, instead of understanding what's actually being built. The decision doesn't open a door. It builds a person. Kahneman's broader body of work treats character and habit less as fixed traits and more as trained patterns, repeated small choices, that, over time, become the automatic responses of System 1 itself. Every time you act instead of ruminating, you're not just resolving one instance of a problem. You're retraining the fast system that will handle the next one. This is also why an unacted-on resolution produces nothing. Deciding, in your head, to finally have the conversation next week changes nothing in your nervous system. The loop doesn't know the difference between a real intention and a rehearsed one, so it keeps running exactly as before. Only the enacted version, the message actually sent. The conversation actually leaves a trace the system can learn from. So, one instruction, doable in the next 24 hours. Take the smallest true piece of the decision you've been avoiding and do that one piece today. Not the whole conversation, the first sentence of it, sent. Not the whole job search, one application, submitted. Not the resolution, the first real external undeniable move. Act at the first real opportunity, not the best one. Waiting for the best opportunity is rumination wearing a strategy's clothes, because delay doesn't hold your resolve in place. It gives the old resistance time to reorganize and come back stronger, better rehearsed than you are. The final chapter isn't about strategy anymore. It's about what this all actually means. Whatever surfaced while you were watching this, a name, a sentence, a room you keep imagining yourself finally walking into, that's not new information. You already knew. The life you want has never been hidden from you. What's been hidden is your willingness to admit you already know the shape of it. Kahneman's larger body of work points at something uncomfortable about how minds work under uncertainty. What looks like careful neutrality is often just avoidance wearing a lab coat. Refusing to decide feels intellectually humble. Frequently, it's closer to a kind of quiet cowardice dressed up as prudence, because prudence is more comfortable to admit to. The real problem was never the decision. You solved the decision months ago. Maybe longer. Some part of you has known the answer for a long time. The real problem is the gap between knowing and doing. The distance you've been living inside without naming it, right from the first chapter of this video. Here's the reframe on the suffering itself. Acute pain is sharp, and it ends. Chronic pain is duller, and it doesn't end, it just gets carried longer, and taxed daily, in smaller installments that add up to more than the acute version would have cost. Delay doesn't reduce what the decision costs you. It just converts a single sharp payment into years of quiet interest. And courage isn't what you're waiting to feel before you move. Courage is what moving produces. It's not a precondition. It's a byproduct assembled after the fact, out of the very evidence you generate by acting. Think back to Chapter 1, the conversation replayed for 3 hours, the text drafted 11 times and never sent, the resignation letter sitting open in a tab for 2 months. None of that was thinking. It only looked like thinking. What it actually was, the whole time, was a fast system running the same alarm on a loop, and a slow system too tired or too willing to ask it to stop. Now you know the difference. That alone won't fix anything by itself, but it means the next time the loop starts up, you'll recognize it for what it is, instead of mistaking it for care. You know what you need to do. You know that you know. You know that you've known for longer than you've told anyone, maybe longer than you've told yourself. You know that the version of this where you wait for certainty first is the same version you've already tried, for months, for years, and it hasn't worked yet. The decision was never the hard part. The waiting was.